Hello and welcome to the first podcast episode, A Coffee for Your Thoughts, together with Michael Vlerick. Thanks for being here. Michael, you are a philosopher.
That's right.
And so maybe let's have some sparring questions to start out. The Holy Trinity in philosophy is, of course, Socrates, Plato and Aristotle. You have a favorite amongst them?
That's an interesting question. I think the answer to that question would change over time. I started with Plato in high school. As you may recall, I did my thesis, the kind of last year thesis in high school on Plato, and this is really what got me into philosophy. But as I moved further, I think now I would actually go for the first one in a row, and I would go for Socrates and this idea of not knowing and then suspending belief. I think is what set the stage for philosophy and then for a more critical approach to knowledge.
It's very interesting. Socrates is, of course, the one that didn't write. We will be discussing your book shortly. Of course, this is a coffee for your thoughts, but you told me you actually don't drink coffee.
Yeah, I'm more of a tea person.
You're more of a tea person.
A tea for my thoughts.
So, a tea for your thoughts. Luckily, there's caffeine in both. So I went to select a very special tea. First, this is actually quite peculiar, but maybe you can already have a taste and share your thoughts on it. It's a very light infusion. I actually just put 4 leaves in here, and it's not cocaine. But do you know what kind of an infusion it is?
Not from the top of my mind. Tastes earthy. I like it. Definitely more of a bittery taste, I would say.
So this is actually, and you can have a look at the leaves. This is coffee leaves. So you actually can make a tea-like drink also with coffee. So this is quite an experience, and that's why I thought let's take it that way. And this way it could still be a coffee for your thoughts.
Exactly. So this is officially the first cup of coffee I'm enjoying.
Yes, so this is actually the leaves. There's some ideas around the fact that it might help coffee farmers, that they might have like an alternative income from their crops. Of course, the leaves are kind of important in this kind of tropical settings to make the coffee berries also, so how they would work that out exactly is not clear, but it's something they could harvest a little bit all year long. So this is for you when you want to do that in the future. It's again 4 leaves, so you can make kind of a similar experience. But then I did go, so this is my kind of product placement, but it's from Palais d'été, and it's a hammam tea, which I kind of chose because I heard that you also went to Egypt.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you, what triggered you to go and explore philosophy there?
Actually, I studied political science there. So I finished my master in philosophy by then, and I was looking to actually both combine, studies with an experience in a radically different culture. This was also obviously in the era post 9/11 and the whole terrorism debate and Islam and so forth was very much in the international picture. And at that point I was thinking maybe I wanted to do something with international relationships, perhaps even diplomacy, and so it seemed like a good idea to get to know in Islamic and Arabic culture and learn the language as well. So I learned Arabic there, basics of Arabic, and I must say it's pretty far now in my memory, but it was an amazing experience. It really opened my eye to a completely different culture, and we would one that I came to appreciate a lot.
Yes. So I also spent some time in Saudi Arabia, and I got to see Mecca from the highway because it's Haram, but also Medina and the mosque where Muhammad is buried. So it's also very intriguing experiences. Also experiencing discrimination from another sense, because I'm not Muslim, I was not allowed to stay in certain hotels and things like this, which is, it helps, you know, we're both white, male, privileged people in this sense, and that was kind of a very helpful experience. Now, I'm not that good in languages as you, because actually we haven't really touched this subject. But we went to the same boarding school.
Exactly, yeah.
I was in the Latin mathematics departments, let's say, but not for the Latin part, which I really struggled with. And you were studying Latin and Greek.
Latin and Greek, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now you know also Arabic.
Well, the basics.
The basics.
Yeah.
But did you try to tackle the Quran in Arabic?
No, I haven't read it in Arabic, and so I did read parts of it. So I did political sciences in general, but a bit focused as well on the Islamic context. And so there were a few courses. There was one course as well I took on Islam and some the basics of Islam for non-Muslims. So there was some reading of the Quran there, or at least some parts, but not that many, I guess, and definitely not in Arabic. I wasn't at that level yet.
But I found it, as I was there experiencing the culture, I found it very interesting reading the full Quran in an English translation, of course. It's, you know, it's like almost a programming book, and I don't mean it in a negative way. We're also programmed, even if we're not Christian, we're also programmed by the Bible. Certain habits we have, things like this. And when you go through the whole Quran, so you see those passages where it's written, you know, you shall say inshallah after every claim you make about the future. You know, so you're going through this whole text and then you arrive and it's like, okay, that's what, of course, they read the Quran, of course. It's kind of a law book also for them, so it kind of drives them. So slowly we're kind of arriving at the beginning of your book, which we'll dive in actually now, which also kind of goes a little bit about programming, but you can disclose
a different kind.
Yes, a different kind of programming. So why we are not happier? So the first question, of course, is when can we expect an English translation?
I hope very soon. As of now, it's just available in Dutch, and but if the book has some success here, I mean, it may be a possibility to get it translated and work with an international publisher.
Yes,
so,
because I have
inshallah, I would say.
Inshallah, I have not seen a similar book in English, like this kind of framework and progression of the ideas. So. I would hope that you can actually do that.
Thank you.
The second thing I want to start with is, what does this mean for you?
Well, I didn't come up with it, so it's an idea of the publisher and then the people coming up with the formatting. But I really like it in the sense of what you see there is like a face, I mean, the statue of a face, and the lips are pursed a little bit, so there's sadness there. She is not happy, but at the same time there's obviously these very visible flowers growing out, and among these flowers, and this is actually my sole contribution to that, because that wasn't there initially, there's a lotus flower, which is, I mean, has a strong symbolic signification in the Buddhist tradition.
Yes.
It grows out of mud, and then from the mud, from the suffering, something beautiful arises. And so this is very much what the book is about. I mean, it starts off explaining why we are not happier, but then at length it goes into how we can become happier, and we can indeed really change the experience of our lives.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. I mean, this is very embarrassing as I'm now working in a botanic garden. But I have to guess, with the lotus flowers, I would want to go between one of those two.
Yeah,
maybe
the one to the right, that's definitely the lotus flower. Yeah,
yes.
This one.
Well, yes, that was my first guess.
Yeah.
Although it's not that I'm let's say, triggered or exposed to them.
Yeah, you
to
don't
recognize
see many of those
but
here.
They do grow on the water also. Am I?
Yeah, from the mud and in
yes,
watery plains,
okay.
I think, yes.
Now, for me, when I saw this, I really liked this image too, for maybe a different reason. I didn't even see the sadness. I was so struck by the flowers, even not realizing it's a lotus, but because I guess my own background and working on coffee, knowing that flowers, they also produce a wide range of substances that influence the species interacting with them. Both us, when they produce this fruit, but also bees.
Yeah.
Did you know that bees like caffeine?
I didn't.
And so, of course, we know caffeine, it is in tea, coffee, of course, but also in citruses. Not in the fruits that we eat, but in the flowers. The flowers produce a little bit of caffeine, and supposedly that motivates some of the bees very much. They get more strength, let's say, to carry on further. Probably, I would hypothesize, to go to then other caffeine-containing flowers of ideally the same species at a further distance. So the flowers don't just produce caffeine, they produce a whole range of substances. And each of those substances can, in subtle ways, kind of impact on the pollinators, or if it's in the fruits, on the kind of consumers of their fruits.
Yeah,
so that was
that's the adaptive value of the flowers, right? So pollination by insects.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what your first image brought to me before even opening.
It takes on new meaning. Wonderful.
Yes, you see, I have like a whole bunch of notes, but we can actually just start at the beginning. So maybe you can just kind of just go broadly. You have it in three main parts, and why you kind of selected that.
Yeah, so the way I'm building up the book is by starting from an evolutionary perspective. And this is what I've been doing in previous research as well. And so when we look at something like happiness, or in a more philosophical way, you could say the human condition, well, we have to start by understanding how our psychological nature came to be. And just as our physical nature, our physiology, well, psychological nature is a product of an evolutionary process of natural selection mainly. And so a very, I think, elucidating way to see that process of natural selection is by taking a genetic perspective on it. So Darwin, who, I mean, is famously the discoverer of natural selection and has developed a theory, and his theory still very much stands. Well, he didn't know anything about genetics, that came later. But in the 20th century, there was a so-called great synthesis between the knowledge acquired in genetics and Darwin's theory of natural selection. And so that genetic perspective really shed a new light on the process of natural selection. Now we understood, how traits would be, passed on to other generations, and how variation could emerge in the first place, and so how there could be natural selection of those traits that.
Now you're hinting also to Mendel, right? That you also mentioned.
Yes, yeah. So Mendel is famously known as the one who laid the groundwork for genetics. And he was very unknown at his time, and he died without being recognized for the work he's done. It's been rediscovered later and then very much developed, and then we have Watson and Crick and Franklin actually as well, who really developed it. And
Franklin the lady.
Exactly, who's also forgotten, passed over by history quite often. So it's good to mention.
Very good that you do justice to her.
But so without going too much into the history, well, we can understand this process of natural selection from a genetic point of view. And from that point of view, the genes, they are biological replicators. They make copies of themselves. Obviously, they're not conscious of this. They don't have any wills or so forth. But, I mean, so they're copying mechanisms, and some of these genes will be more successful than others at copying themselves, right? So there's this kind of, you could say, strong competition between genes to leave as many copies of themselves in the next generation. Some genes take over the gene pool of a species, others will completely disappear, and so forth. And so we need to ask ourselves now, what makes a gene successful? And on the one hand, and I think this is pretty well known, what makes a gene successful are all these physiological traits that aid the organism to survive and reproduce. You know, the long neck of the giraffe to browse the high leaves of the trees and so forth, and then camouflage, and then you know the sharp teeth of the predator. Anyways, all of that's pretty well known. But equally important, at least when it comes to animal organisms, so obviously also including humans, are the way they steer that organism through an environment full of threats and opportunities. Right? So they need to steer clear of all these threats, and they need to seize the opportunities. Opportunities to ensure their survival and reproduction, resources and so forth. And the way they do that is with what I've called in the book, you know, sticks and carrots.
Yes.
So I've got the sticks. These are sensations of physical pain and also all of the painful emotions and negative emotions. And once an organism has experienced those, well, the organism will do anything to avoid experiencing more of that. And then the carrots are, you know, pleasure and then good physical sensations, but also obviously all of the rewarding emotions. And once the organism has experienced that, well, it will want more of those. And how do they steer us? Well, whenever we do something that's bad for survival and reproduction, we get the sick. Think about eating a poisonous berry, you get pain, aches, you vomit,
or you die.
Or you die. Well, then actually it's too late. The final stick. Well, the stick didn't work. I mean, but if you don't die and it was an awful experience, you probably won't eat that berry twice, and then the stick works, right? So you steer clear of that, you know, because that's a threatening thing. If you do something that's good for your survival and reproduction, well, finding good food, finding a mate and so forth, well, you get the carrot, and that motivates you to kind of pursue that in the future as well.
But we can do an interesting reflection actually related to the coffee, not just coffee, tea, even beer, although I would not recommend that for your health. But those are kind of bitter substances that somehow we overcome the stick, right? When we're young, we just don't want any of that, and then so how do you place that in this frame?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and that's definitely going outside of the scope of the book a bit, but it seems that we can really train, and this is really about taste, right? So this is one particular sensation. I mean, what we find pleasant or not. There's a universal aspect to that, like sugary foods, you know, in all cultures, all babies will kind of like that very much, and that will be very motivating in most species. And obviously, maybe that's an interesting one, and that's something we can come back to. Well, that's not by coincidence, obviously, right? So these fruits, and now if you consider humans, that would have guided us to ripe fruit. This would be only sweet substances around, almost in nature. And we very much need those for energy, but also for the vital vitamin C, which we need to get out of food, right? So a very motivating system. Today with, you know, Coca-Cola and all kinds of sweets and so forth, artificially produced sweets, it's not the best strategy to go for this and to consume these products massively. But in ancestral times, that would have led to, you know, health promoting behavior. Now, it's also, I mean, humans are incredibly adaptable to live in different kind of environments, and so you wouldn't find the same kind of food items around in different contexts. And so it really seems that we can train ourselves to kind of enjoy certain foods that maybe do not come as naturally by just being regularly exposed to them, like bitter taste and so forth. And so interestingly as well, I think the fact that we have such a large scope to enjoy very different kind of food items, and therefore eat things that, you know, somebody from another culture would probably have, you know, a disgust reflex and then would not eat, and obviously that reflex would be to protect him against or her against intoxication. But we can overcome that, and that shows how culturally dependent we are, right? So we figured out that certain poisonous plants, for instance, are not poisonous anymore if you kind of treat them in the right way, and then you can eat them and they're perfectly fine. Or some plants that just mimic, you know, being poisonous by having pretty sharp taste are actually perfectly nutritious. And we've come to that knowledge, and therefore, you know, we have also the natural ability to kind of adapt to that knowledge and consume these products.
Yeah, it's probably this combination, because some human evolutionists really think that the way that we are able to eat so much different things compared to other species, like dogs, for example, they die if they have a small piece of chocolate. that's kind of what drove our selective advantage. Probably the combination of our guts and our cultural ability to discuss our food preferences. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And so there's one very clear example, and that's typically an example of what they call gene culture coevolution, and that is the fact that most people, and kind of there's some differences there, ethnic differences, but most people are able to digest milk at an adult age, and that's something unique in mammals. Normally, mammals lose that ability after the weaning phase, so they drink the mother's milk, and then they go over to normal food, and they can no longer digest, the lactose in the milk, right? And so humans are able to do that. And why? Probably we weren't able to do so 15 years ago, 20 years ago, but since the agricultural revolution, we've got this kind of mammal milk.
15,000 years ago.
For the first time, 12, 13,000 years ago, and then 5,000, 6,000 years ago here in Europe, for instance. And so we became very dependent on these calories, and then so the people who just by sheer coincidence were better able to digest milk at a later age would have a strong advantage in terms of survival and reproduction over people not being able to do so. So they passed on their genes, and gradually we became more and more able to digest milk.
Yeah, definitely. When you're not able to digest it, you kind of become bloated. You don't feel as well. But if there's no other food available, I guess it doesn't make you happy, definitely.
No, definitely, and so then you're dependent on a food that you can't properly digest, and you don't get the nutrients as well. And then so interestingly there as well, like in Asian populations, there's much more lactose intolerance than in European and African populations, and that has everything to do with the fact that they didn't rely so heavily on milk, and they had more, plant alternatives.
And they also they don't have that much harsh winters as you have more north, right, where the animals then kind of help producing the calories for us. So you didn't make it explicit, but you were kind of already talking about the blind force that you mentioned in your book. And I actually wanted to go to the first page, because it's a historic event that we both share. I think, I'm not sure.
Tell me.
And it is that, of course, you kind of present it as a blind force and the prison, and you make the analogy with the Matrix. Now, for me, I saw the Matrix for the first time in our boarding school.
Yeah, I think I might have as well. I think that's about when it came out, right?
Yes, it was 1999. For me, it's a very vivid memory. This movie did shape my philosophical awakening up to some parts. Was that also for you the case?
Yeah, I thought it was, definitely something worth contemplating, and then I think at that point as well, I had some inklings of some philosophers who've written about similar kind of ideas, like brains in vats and so forth. So I remember I was reading this introduction to philosophy, because I was very much triggered by these ideas and so forth. So that's definitely something that's always triggered me. So maybe I can just explain the analogy a bit, right? So
helpful.
So in the Matrix, well, as many of the listeners will probably know, humans, the planet is taken over, I think, by very advanced robots, and they use humans as energy sources, like as batteries in a way. So they keep them in these pods, but the humans aren't aware of that because they're fed all of these artificial experiences through electrodes, connected to their brain. So they think they're living in the real world and everything is nice, but in fact they're just lying there in pods, and their energy is being harvested. Now, what I go on to say in the book is that in some sense we are in the Matrix, and I don't mean that we live in these pods and that this is all a simulation, as some people would argue. I don't think we have any ways of knowing all of that, so I don't go in speculations about that. But just the fact that the way we do experience the external world is incredibly determined by our psychological makeup, by our genetic makeup. And I go on to say that in some sense, our situation is actually more lamentable, or is worse than the situation of those humans in the Matrix. It doesn't look as vivid. And the reason, but still, because the reason that I say that is that in the movie The Matrix, Well, the idea is that these humans that are being kept in these pods are fed, you know, mostly pleasant experiences, you know, to keep them subdued and happy, and that they don't, you know, go into any kind of frenzy and discover their true states. So they want to keep them calm and happy, right? So they feed them nice experiences. Now we are being fed very painful experiences constantly, you know, physical pain, emotional pain, and all its variety constantly. And there's good reasons for that. And so that's where I go on explaining the evolutionary background where we actually started now.
But you can make a meta argument about it though, because in the Matrix they project the world as it is in 1999, because in earlier experiments they were not able. They first tried with a utopia setting where they were perfectly happy, and that failed. And then they reverted to the world as it was in 1999. So these ideas that you have, they're kind of also already in the Matrix. I mean, in the movie, kind of.
Should have watched it again. That's
of course, I did watch it again just the other day as preparing for this kind of interview. But I do have a more kind of philosophical argument I want to do about it. As I had kind of similar thoughts, but where I kind of maybe don't go as far with this blind force is that I think natural selection as a logical principle, you know, you can almost kind of see it as program. You know, you could run a simulation right, on a computer, have all individual agents with characteristics, reproduction just as we have, and then you know, you iterate it and you would see evolution, right? I would still not think that they are conscious. You know, as a programmer, I would think those are all huge matrices having all kind of calculations, like you might have in the Matrix. Now, in the book, you emphasize the point that, you know, it's this becoming sentient that, you know, that's also the mechanism that we need for the sticks and the carrots, in some sense. And still, I think, as a programmer, you could make a simulation where your individual agents are not conscious, but behaving like they are sticks and carrots. So this doesn't explain for me why I'm conscious. Can you comment on this and your thoughts?
No, that's a good thing to kind of zoom in on a little bit. Now, for the longest time, we can assume that the situation of life on Earth was exactly what you described, right? Pre-programmed to kind of seize opportunities and stay away from threats without any kind of conscious experience of that, right? That's the way bacteria and so forth still function. Probably that's the way also plants showing certain kind of behavior. I mean, like the sunflower turning to the sun and so forth probably does not have a conscious experience of the sun, and then definitely not an intention to go there and so forth. So very different. It all works fine, right? But it all works fine up to a certain level. Everything needs to be pre-programmed, and then if there's environmental differences and so forth, and you see, well, there's no, I mean, match reaction there, and so therefore the organism is in trouble. Also, this I think is a crucial innovation of sentience, consciousness, if you want, and without going into the big philosophical field of how material brains can produce conscious experiences, because this is a completely different debate. But the adaptive value of it from an evolution perspective is pretty clear, and that is that the organisms can learn, right? Because now what we have, again, we have these sticks and these carrots. So you eat your poisonous berry, you get your stick, you don't die, but you're very sick, it's uncomfortable. So next time you won't eat that, right? If you would be pre-programmed without any conscious experience, you would keep on doing this, right? If there would be this bug in the program, so to speak, and then so you wouldn't learn, and so you wouldn't adapt your behavior. So there's massive adaptive value of having a more open system that can learn. And then what you need to put there is like something that rewards certain behavior and something that punishes certain behavior. And then in very different environments, this kind of system will, get more and more knowledge and come to behavior that actually benefits the replication ambition of our genes, because it brings you to survival and reproduction. So it's very much about learning, I think, where the adaptive value lies.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we could have, I think, 10 hours of discussion going in this direction, right?
At the rate we're going.
But let's go then back to, I would say, the next section, right? Because now we've had the discussion about evolution, how that drives events, and then in the next section, I guess I would say you go more into the psychology, or how the makeup of our brain is, how this programming kind of is, to understand that and how it brings us pain. Although you kind of already were mentioning the carrots and the sticks, but you also really go into the details of the neurotransmitters. So how important is it for us to know about how neurotransmitters function? Is that kind of the scientific background where you then can derive insights from?
Yeah, so the image of neurotransmitters and then hormones I depict in the book is pretty basic, right? So it's only a few, because we possess many more, and I only focus on their relationship to well-being. So it's by no means, a comprehensive view of, neurotransmitters in the brain. This is incredibly complex, and then the more scientists get to know about it, the more they see that we know very little about it, right? So, and this is typically the way it goes at the forefront of science. But so basically, the relevant neurotransmitters are, on the one hand, dopamine. That's a very important one. It's the ultimate carrot in a way. It's the I want feeling. It gives you a feeling of lightheaded euphoria, but it definitely gives you a very strong drive to pursue something. Then we have serotonin, which is more of the laid back, happy feeling when all things are well and everything is going well. And so it's kind of rewarding you for being in a situation that is good for, again, the replication ambitions of our genes, for your survival and reproduction. Then a very important one as well, I would say, is oxytocin. That's the bonding one.
The hugging.
The hugging, the cuddle chemical, if you want, or a neurotransmitter. And I think that's such an important one for us as a social species. Our chance of survival and reproduction really depended on, being part of groups and bonding, with other conspecifics and so forth. So we're highly motivated to do that. And if we go down to what makes us happy, we'll see that, close social connections are a vital part of that. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have, our stress hormone, and that's cortisol. A hormone, and that's cortisol, exactly. And so this is, the ultimate stick, whenever something is kind of threatening our survival and reproductive chances, well, we get a stick, we get a stress reaction, we get fear, we get our fight or flight system being kicked in, and so, we respond with fear, anger, stress, frustration, and so forth.
I can make a very case question on this, let's say, related to actually what we're doing here, also making a podcast episode. It's funny, but yesterday I was so stressed about it. I mean, I did one slow reading of your work, and then yesterday I did a diagonal reading to reactivate my brain, of course. So I came well prepared, and yet I was stressing about it, because you don't know exactly how will the conversation go, how will I be able on that moment to play with your answers, because we can all have conversations in our head, but that's not interesting. But as soon as I start cameras, I'm relaxed and I see where things are going. But even though I know this is kind of my approach, I still stress about it.
Yeah.
How does that work?
And that's typical. Typical for the human mind. And so maybe let's backtrack a little bit to those sticks and carrots, right? So I said sticks to avoid threats and carrots to seize opportunities. Like, the first thing we must realize is, from an evolutionary point of view, threats generally outweigh opportunities, right? Missing an opportunity is definitely a missed chance, but there will be more chance in the future. Missing a threat could be the end of the life of the organism, therefore the end of the replication ambitions of the genes. So they do anything to avoid threats. So that means that we're much more attuned to threats and to things that might go wrong, right? And so you see this in a number of ways. The fact that, for instance, we think of situations as potentially going bad in the future is a major one. We constantly make simulations. And I think research shows that our brain is making simulations up to 50% of the time, like 47, I think, on average. That's what the research shows. And that for the most part, this is not something we enjoy, right? So people report feeling less happy when they're in when their mind is wandering, when they're making these simulations, than when they're focused on their immediate environment or the task at hand, even if that's a very boring environment like a traffic jam, or if you have to do some very boring repetitive task. So that's everything to do with the kind of simulation we constantly make. They're always, they're in 95% of the cases, they're about threatening stuff. Right? And so you think about tomorrow and you think, well, oh, is this going to go well? And then your mind starts, you know, giving you all kinds of scenarios in which it doesn't go well. So constantly scanning the environment for threats. Now, the adaptive value there is clear. It's preparing the organism for possible problems. But especially in, and I think this is where that kind of mismatch also comes in. We already went to that or discussed that based on, you know, the sugary example or the loving sweet food, which was great in ancestral times, not so much in our modern environment. Well, in our modern environment, where, I mean, many of these acute threats are no longer there, well, we still have that brain, and it will still, you know, constantly give, you know, threatening simulations, and then therefore make us feel stressed and so forth. So this is one way in which our genetic programming really, you know, kind of leads to suffering.
Unfortunately,
suffering.
Also our cultural programming. Why are we still so focused? I mean, some would say that we're kind of driven by capitalism, I guess. But, you know, we're having this discussion. I think we have a similar understanding of this, and you would think, you know, we would want to eliminate, you know, forcing this stress. Although you do need a bit of stress, otherwise people would just hang out on the couch, I guess, all the time. But why are we not more rational as a society to, you know, use this knowledge to make it better for everyone?
Well, that's the interesting thing. This knowledge has been around for a very long time, and then if we go to the solution and what makes us happier, we'll see that, you know, in the Buddhist traditions, but also in the Stoics in the West and so forth, they had, you know, this similar understanding of what stands in the way of our happiness and what we can do about it. And then in the last decennia, I mean, the last half century, we've been studying this from a scientific perspective, and we've kind of confirmed that they were right on the mark for the most part, as well of for the diagnosis of what goes wrong and then the solutions they bring. And so, but still, I think, and this is also where the value of this book, I hope, lies. I mean, we are for the most part ignorant of that, and so we look for a happiness in ways where we cannot find it, and we don't even realize we're doing it. These constant negative simulations, and we don't realize the immense impact on our emotional well-being. And obviously, most importantly, we don't have the tools, or we're not aware of the tools we can have to kind of free ourselves from that. So I think bringing this to light is definitely what could help us, and what could also inform our culture then to make things better. And I think we're in the process of getting there, but we still have a long way to go.
And does it help getting older? And what I mean is, at least for me, I'm better able to place my stress. Even yesterday, I was like, okay, you know, it's just part of my genetic makeup to be like that. I can place it. So at a meta level, I'm not suffering from it anymore. I'm like, you know, it will get better. Is that something general that you see older people are more easy to be happier? Or, you know, we can have like, even you can see with young people, I think suicide levels are sometimes strikingly high in very young people when they're just getting to explore who they are, I guess. And seems to be getting better as we get older, or how is that?
I would say it depends, and so there have been quite some studies about, you know, the relationship between well-being and age, and actually where we're at right now is the low point quite often in these studies. So
like our midlife crisis.
Or midlife crisis, and then you see, like, I mean, towards your 60s and so forth, I mean, people tend to be a little bit more happy, a little bit less worried and so forth, and so all of that pressure kind of falls away, and maybe juggling, you know, busy jobs with raising kids and so forth.
Yes.
But so there might be something to that, but then as you said, like, actually through experience, knowing that this is just a stress reaction and there's nothing to worry about there, I think that wouldn't be the experience of many people, right? So I think what we tend to become is what we practice every day. And so if you're constantly, going into crazy stress reactions, well, you're training to be stressed in the future as well, and you're not going to, by mere exposure, going to gain perspective on that, and that's where, some of these tools that we're going to discuss later are come in so handy. And
the solutions that you mentioned, all right, I'm trying to get like an idea where we kind of are time-wise to know when we actually should start discussing the solutions. And it might already be a good time, at least, because it's of course valuable for people to have as many solutions at hand. So this is where the third part basically starts with a lot of attention for Buddhism, which is also something that I had in my kind of philosophical maturing, let's say. For me, it was first Friedrich Nietzsche.
I had that period as well. Nice.
Yes. That came, I think, early 2000s. Even with The Antichrist, which is, I find it a funny book. I kind of needed it as a trigger because I was so stressed about everything. For exams, I would go on my knees and do, how do you call it? Before somebody would shoot you in English, it's schietgebedje in.
I see what you mean. Like
yes,
quick prayer.
Yeah, quick prayer. It's like if it doesn't help, it doesn't harm, right? That was my kind of attitude. So Friedrich helped me to liberate me from that, especially also his thinking about that in Christianity suffering was kind of made contagious. This was for me such a striking idea, and then he still seemed open for Buddhism. It's not that he wouldn't have any criticism, but Buddhism, he kind of got it, because suffering is also so central there in Buddhism. So I kind of went from Nietzsche to Buddhism, and then I started really studying philosophy, let's say. So did you also have a progression then, or a link between Nietzsche and Buddhism, or you arrived independently?
No, I haven't gone from Nietzsche to Buddhism. Actually, I went from, I would say, more reading up on the scientific research on meditation and so forth, and then seeing like the more hard scientific evidence of these practices working, to being more interested in them and seeing like, okay, all of this meditation that scientists recommend, the mindfulness, all of that really comes straight from Buddhism, right? And they haven't almost added anything to it, right? So all of these ideas and these practices were there for all of these years, and now they're being studied. So I think credit should lay where where credits are due, and it's definitely in the Buddhist tradition when it comes to meditation, at least.
Yeah, for me that you had the Four Noble Truths, right? So for the infusion I made, maybe I can still.
Lovely.
It's tricky making the tea with the coffee leaves, but I went for 4 leaves, representing the Four Noble Truths. The first one being, life is suffering, right?
There's suffering.
And then it's knowing what causes it. Yeah. And this is kind of what we had in your second part.
Yeah, definitely.
We could say the first truth was a little bit in the first part, maybe, right? Because it's kind of placing it...
Exactly, there is suffering, and then showing that the suffering is widespread and pretty intense for animal beings. Yeah.
And then the third truth is...
there's an end to suffering.
There's an end to suffering, there's a solution.
Yeah.
And we're in your third part now.
Yeah.
So this is the perfect segue.
I think maybe, can I just, highlight one more thing before we go to solutions. So we've covered the two, and I think these are the main, obstacles to our happiness. So we've covered this focus on everything that might go wrong, that goes wrong in our environment, that went wrong in the past, and so we rehash painful memories and so forth, and we're constantly mind wandering about negative stuff. Like all of that, these lengthened negative emotions that we experience because threats were so important, and I mean, our genetic programming does everything to avoid these threats, right? So strong reactions to that. That's one. Second one is there's also a problem with the carrots, and many of these carrots are what I call fake. You know, we think they're going to, you know, nourish us for a very long time, perhaps even permanently. We think, well, if I have this, you know, then I will be blissfully happy, I will maybe be permanently happy, and maybe we don't say it to ourselves, but often that's the assumption we make, right? If only I could have this, you know, then I would be happy. You know, this is lacking. And well, research and also, you know, the Buddhist psychology, I mean, shows this clearly, and our research really brings this out, is that this is not true, right? For the most part, what will happen is when you will get this new carrot, you will adapt in a very short span of time, and you will be no happier than before, right? Not only that, but you will be craving the next carrot. And this keeps on going, right? So it's called hedonic adaptation. We constantly think, I'll be happy when, and when we get to when, well, it's back to business as usual, and we crave a new thing. And this mental pattern just continues, and it keeps us chronically dissatisfied, right? So that was also one of, you know, the big diagnosis of the Buddha was like, I mean, the source of our unhappiness is constantly wishing the world to be different than it is, right? So this, you should accept the world as it is. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive for solving things and then deal with problems in your life and try to improve conditions for yourself and others. Do that, really. But stop thinking that, I mean, you will only be happy if those attempts turn out successful. Right? That is not true, and that idea is keeping you unhappy, right? You always have the feeling that you're lacking something. So negative emotions and this constant craving and this not being satisfied, or aversion and craving, right? So these two mental poisons, as they're often called in Buddhism, well, this is very much where we need to find a solution, right? And so I think if going to the solution part, well, to, I mean, really enhance our happiness and permanently, you know, raise, you know, the happiness of our lives, I mean, the experience of our lives, to enhance that quality on a more permanent and substantial way, there are three important things we can work on. The first one is to stay out of the grip of, you know, lengthy negative mental reactions or mental emotions. I mean, that's a massive one. I mean, as we've seen, you know, our mind wanders for half of the time, and then this is, you know, an unpleasant experience for the most part of it. We're constantly under the grips of some kind of negative mental reaction. So that's huge. Second is to kind of deal with that chronic dissatisfaction and, you know, really cultivate contentment. And not always want more, but be really happy with life as it is precisely now. And then the final element, and we've touched upon that as well, is the importance of social relations. We're a social species, and so research shows that, you know, nurturing these close social relationships are incredibly important. And also, as a side note to that, well, even, you know, living in a more altruistic way and helping others has been shown to radically enhance your own happiness. Right, so these are the three big pillars, and then maybe we can start on unpacking them.
How we do that step by step. So it's realizing that trick of your genes first, and then you take that. What you basically want to do is, when you know about the carrots and the sticks, I mean, you still want to avoid the sticks, I guess, up to some point. I mean, I guess some people go and look for sticks, I have the impression. But at least for the carrots, I think what can help you is if you cut your carrots in different parts and you put it in the future for you kind of to chase after, but at a slow pace. Is that a good way of seeing your suggestions?
I see what you mean with cutting it in parts and therefore kind of delaying your pleasures and kind of making them more sparse but I would say there's a more radical approach to this, and this is just not reacting to sticks and carrots. And I mean, with the sticks and carrots, I mean the emotional reactions, right? It's not the stuff out there in the world that is being translated to that, but not, you know, the emotional reaction. Don't give in to that constant craving, don't give in to that constant, you know, fear, frustration, I mean, these feelings. And again, this doesn't mean you can have ambition and try to achieve things. Definitely go for all that stuff, but don't feed into that chronic dissatisfaction. Don't cultivate that craving, and also don't cultivate these stress reactions. And so we'll get into how we can do so, but perhaps I think the most important place to start is by realizing, and research shows this really clearly, realizing that if you do, I mean, to raise your happiness, you must work on yourself. Right? Working on your circumstances will not get you anywhere. Even if you're really successful and you make it to the top of your game, I mean, you're an Olympic champion if you're an athlete, or you're the most, you know, famous artist of your time, or whatever, prime minister, president, I mean, name it. Research shows that these people are not happier than average, and they're even more vulnerable to addictions and depressions. Right? So that has everything to do with the fact that, well, the promises made by their genetic programming, if I'll get there, I'll be wonderfully happy, and that, again, that's what we tend to think. But they just get used to that, they get adapted to that, and they're no happier than before, and they have all sorts of problems. And again, that doesn't mean that you can't have ambition. Try to become the Olympic champion or the president, that's perfectly fine. But don't delude yourself that you need this to be happy, or that when you have this, you will be happy guaranteed, right? This is not true, and thinking so is actually an obstacle to your happiness. So you really need to start by working on yourself. Your external circumstances have way less impact on your long-term happiness than you tend to think.
This is actually what's being illustrated here with the Venn diagram.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Just a short side note. I just enjoyed this page so much because I enjoyed reading the warning. These numbers are by approximation. Yeah. I also, you know, it was a fun thing. So it's just a small spoiler, but it was just a fun moment. But exactly, like you kind of genetic, that's kind of a general rule that we have in genetics, right? That we assume 50% genetics almost always, and 50% nurture, right? And then we have 50%, and I guess it's this... conscious activity. This is where we can have the impact.
This is where we can have a massive impact. Now, there's been quite a lot of criticism on that graph, as I also mentioned in the book, right? So it's very hard to disentangle conscious activities with, for instance, genetic programming. So people might have a genetic predisposition to be more vulnerable to stress and so forth. But if they live in a very stress-free environment and they have the environment part, and they have, you know, all of these, you know, mindfulness techniques and so forth, well, they won't suffer from that genetic predisposition, or at least not as much as you'd expect, and so forth. So, but the main thing there, and that everyone still agrees on, I mean, people criticizing that work from different backgrounds, is that these external circumstances have way less impact. So it's 10% there, again, obviously a big approximation there. But way less impact than we think. So what researchers find is that we have a kind of stable happiness set point. And when things go our way, well, we kind of float above it for a little while. And when things go badly, well, we dip under it. But we always seem to come back to that stable happiness set point. So we gravitate around that. Now, what we need to do to become happier is to raise that set point. And the only way to do that is by working on ourselves and working on these three important elements, right? As I said, like not being in the grip of negative emotions so much, and having ways to come out of it, equanimity as I call it, and then, you know, contentment and this loving interaction and so forth.
But this set point that you mentioned, that is what's kind of been set by natural selection over all these millions of years, right? Or do I see that wrong? Like, nature wants to dial us in a way at that level, which is most useful not for ourselves as individuals, but for procreating, etc. And so our challenge then is fighting these millions of years of evolution. Or is that? Yeah,
well, there's a way in which we need to overcome some parts of our genetic programming. And this is very possible, and this is what we'll discuss now, right? So, so indeed, it's important to understand, and I think we've covered this, right? That we are not programmed to be permanently happy. Quite to the contrary, I mean, our genetic programming gives us, you know, little spurts of happiness and makes big promises of happiness constantly. We always think, oh, but then I'll be happy, then I'll be happy. But actually, you know, natural selection in a sense, or genetic programming is the puppeteer and we're the puppets, you know, and that's the way they're running us to seize opportunities and to avoid threats and so forth. So with sticks and carrots and so forth. So they don't want us to be blissfully happy. Quite to the contrary, They want us to come back to a baseline and be craving for more and never be satisfied and always wanting more means, more status, and these kind of things. So that's very much our programming. But I mean, this is not set in stone, and by the things we do, and then these intentional practices, as the researchers have called it, we can definitely change our genetic or psychological programming for the better, and so really make the experience of our lives more rewarding and less painful. And this is what Buddhists have been doing for a very long time. That is what the Stoics talk about, and what they tend to do. And so they all zone in on these same strategies and means to do so. And from an evolutionary perspective, they make a lot of sense. So what we want to do is, we don't want to suffer from these reverberating sticks they unleash on us, these lengthy negative mental reactions, and we don't want to be chronically dissatisfied with our lives. We want to be satisfied and happy with our lives, and so forth. So this is the main thing we need to work on, and to do so, maybe we can delve into the equanimity part. And I like to give an example there to kind of show how our mind works. And so the example I give in the book is, like, imagine you have an important appointment and you're pretty well on time, but then you get a flat tire, you're going to miss that important appointment. And probably what is going to happen is that your mind is going to, first of all, there's going to be stress reaction, fear, perhaps anger, frustration, some of that. And then there's going to be a flood of thoughts, like, why does this have to happen to me? Why of all days does this have to happen today? This never happens, and now I got a flat tire. And what you're doing there is, with your mental reaction, with these thoughts, you're just strengthening, making it more intense, your emotional state, but also lengthening it. So research shows that when you don't feed an emotion in this way, when you don't have more thoughts that kind of lengthen and intensify an emotion, that emotion will not last longer than 90 seconds, or at least the stressful emotions. Right? That is the time your body needs to absorb the cortisol, the stress hormone, the adrenaline, and so forth. Right? But typically we're often, in the grips of negative emotions for, hours.
Yes.
And so this can last and last and last, and it's because we're constantly reigniting that. So actually we're imprisoning ourselves in that emotion.
One negative thought leads to another one.
Yeah, and it strengthens the negative emotion, which then again leads to more thoughts and so forth. And so we're in this vicious circle in which we imprison ourselves. So what is the solution there? Well, very simply, stop doing that. Stop feeding those negative emotions. Obviously, that's much easier said than done. Than when the shit hits the fan, as they say. Then it's easy on paper, but it's something we can practice. And something that is so important in doing so, and this is one of the key contributions from the Buddhist tradition, and then also one of the key elements of what today goes under the umbrella of mindfulness practices, is that we need to kind of establish a new, I would say, a new way of relating to these emotions and thoughts. Now, typically, we're identified with them. It also, it's clear from our language, right? We say, I am angry, and I am sad, and I am afraid. But actually, that's a very wrong way to look at it. It's nothing to do with you. These are just emotions that you experience. So you should say, I feel anger, I feel fear, I feel sadness, and so forth. That would be way more correct, right? So first of all, having this new kind of relationship to these emotions and thoughts really helps. You should start seeing them as, very, very temporary, fleeting appearances in consciousness, which if you don't feed them, well, they will just ebb away in the shortest of times, and they will start, they will turn into something else and so forth, and that's kind of the movie of your life that's constantly changing, it's constant flux. Right? And so by learning to see it that way, and by not feeding into these negative mental emotions, we can really free ourselves from these reverberating sticks. Then we have the initial stress reaction. We just think, interesting experience, we don't feed it, it just goes away. And again, this doesn't mean you do not fix your flat tire. Of course, deal with your problems in the world, fix them. And you will probably be much more efficient and better at fixing it if you're not in the grips of this, incredibly stressful, mental reaction. So go back to a place of serenity, deal with your problems as well as you can, and life will unfold and it will constantly change.
You said, we can free ourselves, right? But this touches upon that argument. I think of the self does not exist, right? Now, I think for people, this is kind of like the paradox, right? We have so few knowledge, and like our self or the self is like the only thing sometimes you feel any certainty about. And to become happy, then there's this, because what you say is perfectly sensible and of course relates to the Buddhist tradition, is realizing you have to give up the self, basically, up to a certain extent. How do you...
All right, so now we go one step further, and I sometimes, I mean, I definitely address it in the book, right? And I think it's a crucial element of the puzzle. In most, you know, short podcasts and presentations, I don't really get to that point because it requires a little bit of background and so forth. So in the Buddhist tradition, but also in other traditions, you know, in Advaita Vedanta, for instance, in the Hindu tradition, but you also find it in other, you know, more mystical traditions throughout the world. There's always this view that, you know, the self is an illusion. So the Buddha says not only you are not your emotions and your thoughts, what we just covered. I mean, the whole idea of a you as, you know, this kind of CEO of your brain, I like to call it, this general manager of your experience that, you know, assembles all kinds of information through the senses, makes decisions and then implements these decisions and causes behavior and speech and so forth. That's kind of the mental image we often adhere to on an intuitive level. That is an illusion, right? So it's definitely not saying there are no bodies. Yes, your body does exist and you have a brain and it produces thoughts and emotions, and nobody's doubting that. But it's this idea that there's this kind of central manager, you know, running the mental show, so to speak. Right, and so the idea there is that that is an illusion, and that is interestingly in you know, recent research, or at least, you know, since the 20th century, interesting research has really shown how these ideas are right on the mark actually, and so maybe I can go into some of that research. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it seems to indicate, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So one way to show this from a scientific perspective are experiments they did on people with split brains.
Yes.
So you had in the 1950s already, you had people with epileptic attacks, and what they did is they severed the kind of little bridge between the two hemispheres of the brain. It's called the corpus callosum. They severed that because then, you know, the epileptic attack wouldn't spread through the whole brain, and so it helped them. And at first they thought, well, interestingly, so we've kind of cut that brain in two in a way, but these people seem to function pretty well, and there doesn't seem to be a problem here at all, right? So maybe this is just something we don't need, you know, that little bridge. But of course, neuroscientists thought like, okay, we should investigate further, and so they did a bunch of experiments on these people. And so the well-known experiments is that they would show an image in one eye, and now you know that, you know, the visual input of one eye goes to the other hemisphere, and so in the visual center this would be interpreted. For instance, they would show a can of Coke, and then that person would get a can of Coke, right? Something like that. Now, interestingly and importantly, because the brain was severed, this other part where the language centers and so forth didn't have access to that information. So when the researcher asked, why did you get that can of Coke? They would just confabulate. They would make up a story. They had no idea this because they were shown get a Coke or something in the visual field, or I mean, shown a can of Coke. They didn't have any knowledge of that. And so they would make up a reason and feel completely certain. And then they did a bunch of experiments, like showing them funny pictures, and they would just burst out laughing. The experiment would again ask, like, why are you laughing? And they would make up in a split second, you know, a reason, like, oh, because you look so funny, or because this happened, and it had nothing to do with it. But these people were absolutely certain that that was the reason they were laughing. Now you might say, okay, this goes for this crazy case in which people have split brains, but actually that seems to be the case for our behavior and for the way our brain works. We get an input, we have automatic behavior, and only afterwards, sometimes even, you know, 10 seconds later, do we have a conscious kind of thought about why we decided to do so. So the decision is actually something that is produced in our brain to kind of justify our behavior to others, but it's actually not what caused the behavior, right? So we think we decide, but actually we do not decide. It goes automatically, and the decision is an illusion, you know, another thought that just pops up that gives us the feeling that we're in control, and then that the evolutionary function then would be, you know, to show other people why you do things, and okay, I'm a reasonable person and so forth. So kind of justification purposes. No, and this was clearly shown in a bunch of very, very interesting experiments, and then this obviously also goes to the debate of free will, which is very much connected with that, and which I don't discuss in the book. And those are the Libet experiments. And so Benjamin Libet, neuroscientist, actually scanned the brain of people, and they had two buttons, and they had different varieties of this experiment. Okay, in one experiment they could press on the left button with their left hand, on the right button with their right hand. So, yeah, and they need to make a decision. And so anyway, he was scanning the brain, and he could see up to 10 seconds before, I mean, the people, the people who were being experimented upon, knew what they were going to press. He would already predict with 100% accuracy on which button they would press, right? So he would say, okay, this person is going to press the left button. 10 seconds lapse, and then this person say, I've made my mind, I'm going to press the left button, right? So it was already what happens, and the theory there is, again, without going into the complexities of the neuroscience, that, I mean, the brain, for some reason, you know, gravitated on the decision to press the left button, and once, you know, that process was already well underway, then the conscious thought pops up that just confirms this, you know.
But we can take the CEO analogy you gave earlier, because I would definitely not dispute these evidence. I kind of know about these works also. So definitely you can start out saying that one cannot claim that every single thing you decide to do, you really decided, right? Definitely, that's what the evidence points to. But you could also think like, well, okay, it's still a CEO, but he delegates the things that are not important to him. Only when it really matters, that decision would come from him. I mean, you could have an alternative explanation.
But then I would say, well, why did you decide that? Because, and what is that decision? It's a thought emerging from your brain, right?
Yes.
And so who decided to generate that thought? And so in a way you can say, for instance, choice, right?
Yes.
So you choose something, and you will have a million reasons why you choose something. Well, I like this taste more than that, and so forth. You can have a million reasons. And so you can kind of choose what you want. But who decided what you will want in the first place?
Yeah.
Right, so at some point you always lose the CEO, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, again, from a neuroscientific point of view, this is clear. But also, by doing certain kinds of meditations, this becomes more and more clear. Like, these thoughts just pop up. I didn't cause them, I cannot stop them, I cannot steer them. This is all just happening. These sensations, these wants, these intentions, these decisions, which are combinations of sensation with thoughts, and then this resolve and so forth, this is all stuff happening, and this comes seemingly out of nowhere and disappears into nowhere.
Yes, but maybe seeing the whole carrots and sticks going around us in the world and making the choice like, no, we have a solution for that. No, I will not be a slave to that anymore. That kind of decision, you could think, comes from a higher self or that CEO. It would be a way of viewing it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going in the direction of, that would for me be kind of like the ethical agent, like the thing that, maybe the second voice in our mind that sometimes tells you to do the right thing. Maybe that's where it doesn't always win, because there's a subconscious and all those sticks and carrots.
No, I see what you mean, and this whole of this Freudian view of the S and then the super ego and so forth. But now I think that there's an interesting point you mentioned there, and like the whole language in which, I mean, this whole book as well, and I do address this. Seems to assume indeed that there is this kind of CEO, and I'm talking to the CEO and I'm saying you don't have to be slave to your sticks and carrots and so forth. But as I say in the book as well, what's literally happening is your brain enters into contact with new information, which leads to new practices, which leads to new experiences and so forth. So I mean, when we speak in strictly correct terms, you know, saying you are the one deciding and then going for meditation and other things that will then improve the quality of your life, all of this, is kind of the language we need. I mean, we don't have any other language to explain that, but kind of feeds into that illusion.
Yes.
Right. So that's a very, very important point, right? But I think what we need to address is, why. I mean, I think many listeners will have that idea, like maybe bracket if it's correct or not. But why would you want this, right? So if you to Western people, like saying, well, there's no you, they're in control. All of this is just happening, and you have the illusion of control, and you have the illusion of making decisions and so forth. For most people, find this disconcerting. I would say they don't find this in any way improving their well-being. Instead, it's a frightening scenario, right? And so, according to the Buddhist tradition, but then again, also according to some of the research that is being done now by people like Sam Harris, who really is a proponent of these kind of insights and the way they spill over on your life and the happiness benefits they produce, it is that, I mean, the major part of our misery is caused by this feeling of being a self. A self that needs to be protected against certain things happening, and a self that needs to seize certain things in order to be happy, right? So we constantly, we constantly have this cramped feeling of self, and it's a source of endless misery, endless stress, endless craving. So if you can just get rid of this feeling of self and you start relating to the conscious experience of life in a very different way, then it's just a bunch of sensory experiences, thoughts and everything just blooming and constantly changing. And you enter into this flow of life that is considered to be incredibly, rewarding and pleasant experience without all of the negativity. And so this is very much where this idea of non-self and then why, many of the meditations from the Buddhist tradition and also now in certain more scientific settings actually try to point out the experience of non-self to you, because just knowing it from an intellectual point of view will not change much. It's really experiencing it through these meditations that can make a major difference.
So your research then brought you to meditating?
Yeah.
Kind of. Okay. And so when did you start practicing meditation?
Yeah, I think 6-7 years ago I started. When I first read about meditation, and then from a scientific point of view, as I mentioned, that's how I got into this whole thing. And I was reading up on the many benefits that are linked to meditation, and I got curious and I started meditating first, pretty low key, like 10-20 minutes with an app a day, but then more seriously, and I've done like longer retreats and so forth, and so really started discovering meditation, and it's a game changer, I would say.
I still remember though that when we were in high school we had those kind of retreats, and we had the meditation session, and then
I remember that as well. We had like this body scan, and I remember thinking that was really pleasant, and then you really felt grounded and restful and so forth, and out of your crazy mind for a while.
Although some of our schoolmates started snoring, I think.
We were laying down. Exactly.
You actually kind of then finished the book. Well, first you kind of have just 10 ways of tackling this. I guess you added 2 to the 8th path that we have in Buddha. No, it's very practical. It's also very useful, to kind of summarize which is the one that you recommend most for people to start with as an advice to apply to their daily life, maybe before they already go and have a read of your book, or they can do it at the same time, but how can they start changing their life for the better?
Well, I think it all starts with knowing how to form and discard habits, because our lives are just led by habits, right? We don't always think about it, and luckily otherwise everything would take so much mental energy and so forth, so what we do and so forth is for a major part the result of of habits. And in order to get to happiness, well, we need to develop certain habits, like meditation could help, and also a healthy lifestyle and moving enough. It's clearly shown that to promote happiness. So we've got this happiness promoting habits, and then we've got habits that stand in the way of our happiness. Addictive behaviors are a clear example. And so knowing that, how you should go about forming habits is, the first prerequisite to get something started. And so maybe it's important to go in there. Well, it's actually pretty simple on paper what you need to do, right? So in order to form a habit, you need to repeat it often enough so that it becomes a habit. And in order to get there, it's best to do something daily and to start really small. You know, if you want to start meditating, for instance, maybe you start with 5 minutes a day, not more. Just something you know that you won't have a lot of resistance doing, and you will always be able to fit it in. Important to do it around the same time every day. That will definitely help to, you know, kick the habit in, and then the habit will become automatic, like brushing your teeth at certain times of the day. And also to kind of reward that behavior in a way, and that can be pretty stupid, you know, like you can have a streak, you know, and some of these meditation apps have that. So you meditate every day, you don't break your streak. And then research shows that after, you know, a month and a half, like 45 days is often named and so forth, that this will become more automatic and it will require less energy from you, and then you can start expanding that. Now, when it comes to, you know, getting rid of certain habits, it's a bit more complicated. So first of all, you need to be aware that it's hard to just delete a habit from your brain as such. So you need to replace the habit you want to replace. For instance, let's say you have a bit of a social media addiction and it doesn't benefit you. Well, you want to stop. Well, first of all, you need to replace that behavior with something else. Whenever you feel the urge, you know, you can do something else. Maybe, you know, have a few mindful breaths.
Well, actually, I started creating content. That was my trick to escape following all these kind of videos. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So replace it with another habit, and the problems are then moved to somebody else.
Yes.
Now I think, well, good content is obviously not what we should not have in our lives. That's definitely not the point, right? But this endless scrolling on social media can definitely be a problem. I address it in the book as well. Now, what you need to do then is make the old habit as hard as possible. So for instance, again, the social media example, you know, erase the apps from your phone, log out, that if you want to go back into your social media platform, that at least, you know, you need to log in, put in your password and so forth. So you have all of this time to know, like, okay, no, I'm back in the habit. So you make that as hard as possible, and you make your replacement habit as easy as possible, right? So, and that way, again, if you do this for long enough, you know, whenever you have your trigger to get into your addictive behavior, you will actually have this different kind of output that is perfectly fine, and therefore you can get rid of certain habits and even addictions. And so knowing this is incredibly empowering. So because then, I mean, again, the you under in square quotes based on what we just said, but then you really become the architect of your life, right? Yes. You can, you know, develop certain habits and get rid of habits, and then you can just implement all of these things that are associated with more happiness, and then you can get rid of all of these things that are associated with less happiness. And,
It sounds like a perfect plan. So I would say, if you haven't already, go get the book if you understand Dutch, or wait for when we have the English version. Thank you, Michael. Connection is important, so that's why we'll.
Thank you, Francis.
Formally close it like this. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed going through your book also. I find it important for people to, well, learn about themselves. Thank you for following this podcast, and hope to see you on one of the next episodes.